Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Abrahams, and I am so excited to be with you today. I teach strategic communication at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I also host a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart. And that's what we're here to talk about today, how we can learn to be more effective in our communication, especially when we are talking in the moment. You know, speaking in front of others is difficult, especially when it's planned. You've had time to think about it. You've created the presentation, the pitch, the meeting agenda. But it's even more difficult when we have to speak spontaneously, answer questions, give feedback, fix our mistakes, make small talk. When you think about it, most of our communication happens in the moment. And yet, many of us never get any training on that. So I'm very excited today to be with you to talk to you about a methodology that all you can use to help yourself in those moments when you're put on the spot. Now, listening to me might be a little educational, but what's more important is listening to each other. And I am thrilled to take your questions after I give a brief overview. And I know several of you submitted questions in advance, and I look forward to answering some of those. And then you'll have an opportunity throughout this conversation to add your own questions. So I am very excited for us to get started. So speaking in the moment can be very challenging for many reasons. It can feel pressure filled. We can be nervous. We want to achieve and do it well. In order to do this, I believe there are some very specific steps that we can follow. Many years ago, almost 10 years ago now, the deans at Stanford's Business School came to me with a problem. And they said our very bright students, and they are very, very bright, were struggling when asked to speak on the spot. You all remember back in school when the mean, evil professor would point at you and say, "What do you think?" The dreaded cold call. Well, our students who knew the answer were struggling to respond. And they said, "Is there something we can do?" And as the communication person at the school, they said, "Will you help us?" So I did a deep dive into research in sociology, communication, psychology, even neurology, and improvisation. And as a result, I created a workshop based on a 6-step methodology that now, to this day, every Stanford MBA student has the opportunity to take within the first few weeks of being on campus. And I'd like to share with you a distillation of that methodology and then take your questions. It's all captured in many different places in my book, Think Faster, Talk Smarter, and in many of the episodes that we have of Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast. It boils down to 2 specific areas we have to focus on, both mindset and messaging. So for a few minutes, I'd like to introduce you to the 6 steps, 4 of which fall under mindset and 2 which fall under messaging. And then I look forward to addressing your questions. Before we ever speak in the moment, we have to prepare our approach, our mindset. We have to realize that this is a learned skill. Some of us feel that I'm just not born with the gift of gab. I am not somebody who can respond in the moment. And the reality is we all can learn to do this better. The irony of all of this, the counterintuitive notion is you can actually prepare to be spontaneous. And that's what allows you to be a better in the moment communicator. When it comes to preparation, we really have to think about the different ways that we can get our mindset straight. And the very first issue, the very first step is managing anxiety. Most people feel nervous in high stakes communication situations, be they planned or spontaneous. And we have to tackle this beast before we can actually be able to speak in the moment. And when it comes to anxiety management, up to 85% of people report feeling nervous in high stakes situations. And quite frankly, I think the other 15% are lying. I think we could create a situation where they feel nervous too. When it comes to managing anxiety, we have to take a 2-pronged approach. We have to manage symptoms and sources. So I'd like to break it down and talk a little bit about each. But before I do, I want each of you to think for a moment. How do you feel when you see a nervous communicator communicate? Now, some of you might like watching nervous people suffer, but most of us don't. We feel sorry for them, empathy. Maybe we ourselves begin to feel nervous because of their anxiety. I call this secondhand anxiety. So, if for no other reason we have to learn to manage our anxiety when speaking, so we make our audience comfortable and don't distract them from our message. So, each of you take a moment to reflect on what happens to you when you feel nervous. Some of you might feel that rapid heart rate. Others of you might get a little shaky. Some of you might get dry mouth. Or if you're like me, you might blush and perspire as that anxiety rises. These are all normal and natural symptomatic responses to threat. Your body sees speaking in the moment or in a planned way as a threat. And if we have time when we get to the Q&A, I'm happy to share why those of us who study this believe that's the case. But for now, we just have to buy into the fact that our bodies respond to anxiety with the fight or flight response. And every single one of the symptoms you feel and that I described are a result of that. When you get nervous and are under threat, your body is very smart. It wants to give you the energy to fight or flee. And to get that energy, you need to oxygenate your blood. So the very first thing your body does is it starts your heart beating faster. And you begin to breathe more shallow so you can breathe more quickly. More air in, more oxygenated your blood becomes. Now, unfortunately, this can be very distracting. Feeling your heart pounding in your chest can be very distracting. And when you breathe shallow, it can influence your voice. Your voice is a wind instrument, just like a trumpet, clarinet, or flute. The faster you breathe, the faster you speak. Many nervous people begin talking really fast. One of the things we can do to mitigate this is to take some deep belly breaths. If you've ever done yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, you know what this deep breathing is like. Interestingly, the power comes on the exhalation. So my rule of thumb, or I like to joke, my rule of lung, is you want your exhale to be twice as long as your inhale. So if you take a 3 count in, really filling your lower abdomen, take a 6 count out. And you only have to do this a few times, 2 or 3 times, for your body to experience the relaxation response. So in so doing, you slow your heart rate down, you slow your speaking rate down, your pitch and tone becomes more normal, and you will feel calmer. Now, some of us shake. That's adrenaline. Adrenaline's sole purpose is to move you from threat to safety. It's about movement. Unfortunately, many of us move in spurious, random ways. We shift our bodies, we tilt our head, we move our head side to side. That becomes distracting. Rather, harness this desire to move in a purposeful way. Take a step towards your audience. Gesture broadly. All of those convey confidence and give that anxiety or the adrenaline a place to go so you look less anxious. If you get dry mouth, your body's smart. You're not going to eat a big meal when you're under threat. So it stops the salivary glands. It shuts them down. You can reactivate them. Take some warm water and slosh it around your mouth. If you've ever used mouthwash, just do the same thing with warm water. Suck on a lozenge or chew some gum before speaking, obviously, and it will reactivate those salivary glands. And finally, if you're like me and you blush and perspire, that's because your core body temperature is going up. Your heart's beating faster, your body's tensing up because you're nervous. You're pushing more blood through tighter tubes. It drives the blood pressure up. This is just like you're exercising. Any of you who exercise for any length of time likely turn red and perspire. So we are heating up as a result. So the way to reduce this is to cool ourselves down. And you can cool yourself down simply by holding something cold in the palms of your hand. The palms of your hand are thermoregulators for your body. If you've ever had a cold or a fever and you put a compress on your head to reduce your temperature, your palms do exactly the same thing. You've all done this in reverse. On a cold morning, if you've ever held a warm mug of coffee or tea and felt it warming you up, we're just doing the same in reverse by holding something cold. So the bottom line is this: when it comes to symptoms of anxiety, there are things you can do to manage it. Deep breathing, purposeful movement, holding something cold, all of these are tools. And there are many other suggestions to follow in the book and in some resources I'll show you at the end. If you are a nervous speaker, there are things you can do to bolster your confidence. The second side of this equation is sources. Sources are the things that exacerbate your anxiety. And step 2 of this methodology addresses some of these sources. Many of us, when we communicate, we want to be right. We want to communicate perfectly. And we put a tremendous pressure on ourselves to do it right. Think of it this way. When we do this, we actually stress our very thin cognitive bandwidth. In many ways, your brain is like a computer. It's not a perfect analogy, but for this example, it works. If you have a laptop or a phone or a tablet that has many windows and apps open all at the same time, each one of those windows and apps is performing less well because the others are open. You are stressing out the CPU. You're stretching the bandwidth. The same is true with your brain. If I am really focused on making sure everything I say is perfect, I then only have limited bandwidth to focus on what it is I really want to say. This is why memorizing is so bad and so risky. Because if I memorize, I've created the perfect way to say what I want to say. And I am constantly judging and evaluating everything I'm saying against that perfect way, which separates or reduces my cognitive focus. So I like to tell my students it's about connection, not perfection. Instead of focusing on being perfect, focus on the role of communication to connect to your audience. So instead of wanting it and focusing on getting it right, just focus on getting it done. On the very first day of my Stanford MBA class, I tell all of my students to maximize their mediocrity. And you should see their jaws drop. Stanford students have never been told to be mediocre. But what I mean is this very idea that you now understand. By just getting the job done, just focus on what needs to happen, you free up a tremendous amount of resources to do it really well. So when I say maximize mediocrity, I then follow it by saying, so you can achieve communication greatness. You free up bandwidth. So a big source of our anxiety is the fact that we want to speak perfectly. And I know many of you might find yourself speaking in a language that's not your native language. And that puts an added pressure to be perfect, to do it right. And instead, I would just encourage you just to say what needs to be said, maybe repeat yourself, tell a story after you give an example, and that helps connect. So step 1 of the methodology is to manage anxiety, particularly the symptoms. Step 2 is to get out of your own way. It's one of the sources of anxiety. Now, step 3 has to do with how we envision our communication. Many of us see spontaneous speaking as threatening or challenging. Let's take Q&A, for example, question and answers. Most people, when they realize they have to do Q&A, get very nervous. They're afraid they're going to be threatened, challenged, put to the test. In fact, rather than seeing communication as a challenge, which causes you to retreat, causes your answers to be short, your tone to be curt, if you see it instead of a challenge as an opportunity to connect, to learn, to expand what you know and that of what others know, then all of a sudden you change everything. You approach, your answers get longer, your tone is more collaborative. Now, I am not naive. There are times where people really are challenging you and coming after you. And in those situations, you can still look for some area of commonality. Maybe it's just the fact that you both care about whatever issue you're debating them. So the third step is to see speaking as an opportunity, not a threat or a challenge. Now, I did not say any of these steps are easy. It takes time, practice, and work. But when you do that, you actually put yourself in a better place. So the first 3 steps are manage anxiety, get out of your own way. That is, just strive to get it done, not be perfect. And then see things as an opportunity, not a threat. The final of the mindset pieces has to do with listening. The reality is this: we're not very good listeners. And because of that, we miss the real understanding of what needs to be done in the moment. Let me give you an example. This is very true. This happened to me. I was in a meeting and I came out of the meeting with a colleague, and the colleague turned to me and said, "How do you think the meeting went?" I immediately heard feedback, and I didn't think the meeting went particularly well. So I said, "Here's all the things we did wrong. Here's what we could have done better." But had I really truly listened, not just to what was said, but how and where and when, I would have realized that I had just made a big mistake. You see, my colleague came out the back door, not the front door, was looking down and speaking softly. What they wanted in that moment was not feedback. They wanted support because they, like I, knew the meeting did not go well. And I ruined that relationship for a while. They were very hurt by what I said because I misheard the circumstance. So, how do we become better listeners? 3 things. And I learned these from a colleague of mine at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, Collins Dobbs. Collins likes to talk about 3 things when it comes to crucial conversations, and I borrowed these 3 things to talk about listening. Pace, space, grace. Pace, space, grace. You have to slow things down to listen better. Let's face it, all of us are moving at a really fast pace. A lot is going on. In a world where attention is our most precious commodity, we have to slow down so we can really focus. That's pace. We then have to give ourselves space. Sometimes it's physical space. Move to a place where you can actually hear. There's a lot of noise in the world. But more importantly, it's space in your mind. Many of us, as soon as we hear what somebody's saying, we think we understand it, we begin judging, evaluating, rehearsing. We stop listening. So give yourself the space to actually listen completely. A great way to do this is to listen as if you are going to paraphrase. Listen as if you have to report back to the person the critical elements of what they said. That forces you to take space. And then finally, have some grace. Grace on yourself. Take the time to appreciate your internal response to what somebody says. If I would have paused just for a second and given myself a little grace, I would have realized that my colleague certainly did not want feedback. So grace is all about listening not just to what is said, but how it is said, where it is said, when it is said, and then listening internally to your response to it. So the final step of mindset is to listen better. Pace, space, grace. All right. We've done a lot of work in preparing ourselves in our approach to spontaneous speaking, but we haven't actually spoken yet. So now we move to the second phase, messaging. There are only 2 steps. I know you've been listening to me a long time. I'll get to the questions in a moment. But we have to actually say something. When we go to say something, we must say something that is structured. Many of us, when we're put on the spot in the moment, we simply respond by itemizing information. We just list things out as it pops into our head. Our brains are not wired for lists. We don't remember lists well at all. Think about this. When you go to the market to buy food, groceries, how many items do you need to buy before you actually have to write it down so you don't forget? For me, it's 3. Anything over 3, I'm going to forget. Yet, we load our slides with bullet points. Bullets kill. Don't kill your audience with bullet points. Instead of listing information, provide a structure. A structure is nothing more than a logical connection of ideas, a beginning, a middle, and an end. You all know structure. If you've ever watched a television advertisement, you're familiar with one structure: problem, solution, benefit. Almost every television ad is in this structure. There's some issue, challenge in the world. Their product or service remedies or fixes it, and then you benefit in some way. I don't care if you're selling automobiles, medicines, alcohol. Most ads follow problem, solution, benefit. It's a logical connection. You can use this structure when you have to make a pitch or try to convince people of your position or your ideas. Problem, solution, benefit. A logical connection, not just a list. Now, if any of you have ever heard from me before, read any of my work, you know that I have a favorite structure. It's 3 simple questions. What? So what? Now what? What is the information you're conveying? So what is why is it important? And now what is what comes next? So let's imagine you're in a meeting and your boss turns to you and says, "Hey, give me an update on your project." You hadn't planned it, you don't have slides, you haven't practiced, you're put on the spot. You can use this structure to help. You simply say what you've been doing. That's your update. You then explain why it's important to the goals of the organization or to your plan. That's the so what. And then you explain what comes next, the contingencies that you have. What, so what, now what? It's an incredibly useful structure and one you can do whenever you're updating or informing people. In fact, I want to take a quick time out. Everything I've said today, has been in that structure. I told you what it was, why it's important, how you can use it. It's a great structure for teaching. So the very first thing we need to do is have structure to our spontaneous speaking. Think of it this way. Structure is like a recipe. If you follow it, you're going to get a good outcome. I'm the world's worst cook. You would never want to eat any of my cooking, but I'm made a better cook when I follow a recipe. So having a recipe or two at the ready can help. I'm not saying you always have to use it, but having it when you need it can help. And there are myriad structures. I've just talked about two, but there are others. Comparison, contrast, conclusion. Some of you know STAR, situation, task, analysis, results, past, present, future. There are many structures. And in my book, I itemize several of them. That's the fifth step, structure. The final steps has to do with being focused. Many of us, especially when we speak in the moment, say more than we need to. We aren't concise and clear. Attention, as I mentioned, is the most precious commodity. If I'm asking you to spend more attention than you really need, then I'm likely to lose you. We need to focus. My mother has a wonderful saying that I try to live my life by. Tell the time, don't build the clock. Many of us are clock builders when we communicate. We say more than we need to. How do you focus? Two ways. First, make your content relevant to your audience. You have to really know your audience and what's important to them. So rather than saying everything you possibly could, only say the things that are important for your audience. So relevance, which means you have to think about who's in the audience. What do they know? What's important to them? What have they done in the past? That interrogation will help you. So relevance is number one. And number two is to have a clear goal. Whenever you communicate, spontaneously or planned, you should have a clear goal. To me, a goal has three parts: information, emotion, and action. What do I want the audience to know? How do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? If you have a goal for your communication, it will help you focus. It's a target. You will aim better when you have a target. Well, there you have it. 6 steps to helping you speak better spontaneously. It's about anxiety management, getting out of your own way, seeing these things as opportunities, listening deeply and profoundly, structuring your content, and focusing it. This takes time and practice. Doing any one of these steps, or in fact, any part of one of these steps, will make you a better spontaneous speaker. Doing multiple steps, or all of them, will make you a fantastic spontaneous speaker. It is a process, a journey. It's not something that's like a light switch where all of a sudden you know it and then you do it well. You have to practice. Think about athletes and how much they train so that they can be agile and respond in the moment. You too have to train. And there are lots of ways to do that. Get some friends together and practice. Join Toastmasters, an international organization designed to help. Take classes from people like me and others. Listen to podcasts, read books. These are ways to learn and practice. You can even use AI. Let's say you want to get better at Q&A skills. Go to your favorite AI tool and say, giving a presentation on this, give me 3 questions if you were part of this audience, and then practice responding. All right, you've survived. I've shared with you the 6 steps of the methodology. Now I'd love to listen to you and hear from you. So I'm going to take a moment or two to answer questions. Some of these questions came in earlier, and then some I see have been coming in as I speak. So let me start with some of the questions that came in. I hope I get to as many of these as possible, and I'll share with you when I'm done ways to reach out to me if you have more questions. Question number 1. Daring to be dull, free speakers from performance pressure. Have you observed a leader lean into the simple, seemingly dull answers and unexpectedly deepen trust? What made this simplicity so powerful? I love the insight that this question asks. So, dare to be dull is a term that comes from improvisation. Improv is a wonderful tool, not for getting up on stage and being funny, although it can do that. Improv teaches you how to be in the moment and present and how to respond to situations that unfold in front of you. And they have amazing sayings, one of which is dare to be dull, which is the same as maximize your mediocrity. Just get it done. Yes, there are many leaders I know who have adopted this principle and have done well. I don't name names for leaders that I coach because I believe in the trust and the candidness that we have. But I will simply share that a leader of a major U.S. bank, one that you've all heard of, has adopted this technique. He was a very nervous speaker, and by giving himself permission just to get the work done, he is much better when being interviewed for television or presenting in front of Congress or even internal all hands. So taking this approach can really change your idea of how to do that. Another question is, in impromptu settings, is it better to aim for brevity or fuller content? How do we avoid rambling while still being substantial? So I believe less is more often in communication. Tell the time, don't build the clock. So if you have a lot to say the critical part. Think to yourself, what's the bottom line? What's the most important? Start there. Say what you need to support that bottom line, and then you can always ask if the audience would like to learn more. You don't get to decide or have to decide how much to say. Ask them. So I can give an answer, I can explain a point, and then say, would you like me to say more? Would it help you if I went into more content? So let the audience guide you, but start from the bottom line, and that will help you be more concise. Having a goal, making sure you're relevant, and knowing the bottom line will help you find that balance between, as the question asker said, rambling and being substantial. This is a great question. How can we quickly surface the audience's needs and reflect on them in real time? A couple ideas here. One, be very observant. If you're not the first person in a meeting to speak, be observing how others are responding to what the previous speakers do. Do they seem eager to focus on one point? Are they looking for a particular type of information? Many of us, before it's our turn to communicate, go inside ourselves and we practice, or we say all these negative things like, I'm not as prepared, that other person's so great. Be externally focused, listen, observe, and that will help. Second, you can ask. You can ask people, how much do you know about this? You can take a poll. How many of you know, or how many of you have? Or tell me a story about a time when you, and have them finish the story. And then that'll help you figure out their level of knowledge and the level of knowledge that you need to address. So I like the question because the question fundamentally comes from a place, how do I best serve my audience? And the answer is you have to ascertain where they're at while you are communicating. Oh, here's somebody asks about small talk. I love this. Could you give us a quick real-time template for turning small talk into meaningful connection? Absolutely. Let me spend a few moments on small talk. When my latest book came out, which is all about spontaneous speaking, the second part of the book is about 6 very specific situations we find ourselves in where we have to spontaneously speak. There was originally only going to be 5. And at the very last minute, I decided to write about small talk. It was really an afterthought. It was like, maybe some people will find this interesting. It turns out, across all the topics I talk the most about based on this book and methodology, small talk is the thing people want to talk about the most. So I made a mistake. I didn't realize the significance and how hard it is. So let me answer the question. What are some things we can do to make small talk easier and get to deeper connection quicker? First, we have to change how we approach small talk. Many of us see it as a necessary evil, something that's challenging. We don't like doing it. It's petty. It doesn't really matter. In fact, I think really big things happen during small talk. I challenge each of you to think about your friendship network. I bet at least one person in your real in-person friendship network you got to know through small talk. We do a lot of important things through small talk. We learn, we connect, we deepen relationships. Small talk leads to big things. And the first thing we need to do to help ourselves really take advantage of it is change our perspective. As I shared with you, I host a podcast. I've done so for over 5.5 years. It does very well in your part of the world. And as part of that, I interviewed a very talented person. Her name is Rachel Greenwald. Rachel is an academic, and she's also a professional matchmaker. Go figure that out. And she shared something with me that rings very true, and I hope it rings true for you. In small talk, she said, the goal is not to be interesting, but to be interested. In other words, we want to focus on being interested in the other person. The key to small talk is asking questions and connecting with others. It's not about making yourself the star or showing off or getting important points across. Some of the best things you can do to start small talk is to ask questions, to acknowledge something obvious in the environment. A quick story. I was at a conference. I didn't know many people. I'm waiting in line for food, and there's somebody standing next to me, and I start the conversation simply by saying, I didn't realize there was a memo about wearing blue. Now, there wasn't, but everybody in the room was dressed in different shades of blue, and I wasn't, and this guy wasn't. So I turned to him, and I say this, and he looks around, he goes, yeah, that's really strange. And that's all it took. Just that simple observation. He and I started up a conversation. We found we have lots in common. We've become really good friends after connecting on LinkedIn. So much so, when I travel to his part of the world, I visit him. He does the same for me. All because I pointed out an observation. Small talk can happen from small things. So it's about being interested, not interesting. Ask questions, make observations. Now, the question was, what are some subtle things we can do, a template, if you will, to turn small talk into really substantial connection? Let me get a little academic on you. Those who study small talk or conversation in general, and if you think about it, small talk is just a type of conversation, there are two primary types of turns you can take. A conversation is nothing more than turn taking. One is what's called a supporting turn, and another is a switching turn. Now, a supporting turn is where I support what you've said. I keep that particular topic alive. Let's imagine you and I are talking and you say, hey, Matt, I just got back from a trip where I went to Europe. A supporting turn would be, oh, what countries did you visit? I'm keeping the topic on what you started. Now, a switching turn would be, oh, really? I just traveled to Asia. See what I did there is I switched the topic. Now, what the research suggests is that good deepening conversation occurs when you do more supporting turns than switching turns. Now, I don't want you sitting there counting all the, did I switch? Did I support? Did I switch? Just in general, in a conversation, try to use more supporting than switching. Now, if all you do is support, though, then it feels like you're just interrogating the person and avoiding anything. So you do have to switch occasionally. And if all you do is switch, then you seem very egotistical and distancing. So there's a simple framework. So I gave you a little bit more about how small talk is important, but that's something you can use. All right, let me see some other questions. Is engaging the audience right away, show of hands, a good way to start? So engaging the audience right away is absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. As I've said a couple times, attention is our most precious commodity. You have to engage your audience right away. And there are many ways to do it. It's not just show of hands, although that's a good one. Let me share with you, there are 3 major ways to engage your audience. Physically, that is getting them doing something physical. Have them watch a video, put up a quote they have to read, an interesting picture, chart, diagram, taking a poll as the question asker asked. If you're virtual, have them type into the chat, have them go into breakout rooms, have them use the reaction buttons like thumbs up or raising their hands. Where their bodies go, their brain will follow. So that's one way of engagement, physical. Another way of engagement is mental. Ask questions, use analogies, tell stories. Those are the 3 main ways to engage people mentally. Again, asking questions, using analogies, telling stories. All of those cause your brain to get engaged. And then finally is linguistic. Using words like you or us or we cause people to pay more attention. I was coaching a very senior leader of a tech company, and he was doing a big keynote speech. And he started the keynote speech by saying, knowledge workers must. And I was thinking, Who are you talking to? I asked him, who's in the audience? He said, knowledge workers. I said, so say you. Don't say knowledge workers. And if you can, use people's names if you know them. That engages people. So yes, you should engage from the start. Take different techniques from physical, mental, or linguistic engagement. Oh, this is a wonderful question. How can leaders use strategic communication to build trust during times of uncertainty? I don't want to make this a commercial for Think Fast, Talk Smart, the podcast, but this coming Thursday, and I know some of you are watching this recorded, so you can check on it later. This coming Thursday, we're releasing an episode with Richard Edelman. Edelman is the world's leading PR firm studying communication, trust, etc. They put out a trust index. And in it, their CEO, Richard Edelman, says that this is critical, that we have to use communication to build trust. And interestingly, you would think a PR firm would be all about broadcasting information. He says, as I support, it's about listening. You build trust by listening. If you are a leader, lead by listening. Listen to what your constituents say, be they internal employees, your immediate team, your partners, the market, whatever. Listen, ask questions. And when you hear, summarize what you hear. You don't have to agree with it. Just say what you hear. Relationships and trust come from actual connecting. And the best way to connect is listening. Another one of my guests, Jamil Zaki, he's a professor at Stanford, teaches psychology, has written a great book on skepticism. He talks about trusting loudly. And by this, what he means is naming your trust. Say, I trust you when you say that. Or because you've done this, I trust you. So one way to build trust is to tell people that you trust them if you honestly and authentically do. So trust loudly, as Jamil Zaki says. All right, a few more questions. Let me see. I love these questions. These are so insightful. I believe that public speaking and communication are key to any success. I'm curious to know your perspective. When it comes to doing business, what do you think is more crucial, the clarity of your message or the empathy behind it? Lovely question. Let me share with you that in my strategic communication class, I've been teaching this for over 15 years now. The very first article we read in class is an article that talks about the balance effective leaders need to have between warmth and strength, competence, clarity, if you will, and empathy. We have to find a balance. Now, what all the research says that I'm familiar with is that leading with warmth, leading with empathy is helpful. Now, there are certainly times where strength, competence, clarity are critical, but connecting first is really important. And that connection can come through listening, can come through reminding people of something you've heard before. I believe both are important. And I really would echo what the beginning part of the question. I believe that public speaking and communication are key to success. I 100% believe it. In fact, I believe communication is operationalized leadership. The way you lead is through how you communicate. So the question is very insightful, and I think it's a balance of warmth and empathy. I'm sorry, warmth and competence. I'm looking at other questions. In a tough negotiation, how can you come across as strong yet not make the other person feel bad? So a few things I want to say about negotiation. So my colleague at the business school, Michelle Gelfand, she is wonderful. She has so much important stuff to say about negotiation and conflict management. But one of the things that really sticks out is she likes to talk about managing your metaphors. Mind your metaphors. The way we approach our negotiation, conflict management, persuasion, whatever you want to focus on, really influences how we do it. So if you see negotiation as a battle, that metaphor is going to affect the way you communicate. If you see it as a dance or a problem to be solved, you will approach it differently. So I encourage all of you, before you go into a high stakes negotiation, take a step back and say, what is my approach here? And could a different approach lead to a different type of communication? So how we approach it, our mindset matters. Our metaphors matter. Next, you really have to Go out of your way to understand the other person's position. That doesn't mean you agree with it. It just means you understand it, which means listening and questioning. Next, you have to establish your priorities. What's most important to you? The research in negotiation suggests the more things you combine together to negotiate, the better the negotiation will go because you have more levers to pull. If you're only negotiating on one point, that's binary. Either you get it or you don't. But if you have 3 or 4 points you're negotiating together, maybe you get 3 and not all 4. So you have to prioritize what it is you're negotiating. You also have to think about the other person's prioritization. We often assume that our approach to what we're saying is exactly equal to what the other person we're negotiating with. Let me give you a classic example, and I'll share with you how I manage this. So this is interpersonal. This is between me and my wife and I. So let's imagine that we've agreed we want to go out to dinner. But my wife would like to go out to Chinese food, and I'd like to go out to Italian. Potential negotiation, potential conflict, right? What we do in these circumstances often is we'll share with the other person how relevant or how important that position is to us. So I might say, I really want to go out to Italian food. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 5. And my wife might say, I want to go out to Chinese food. It's an 8. Well, there's no negotiation. There's no debate. There's no conflict. It's more important to her, less important to me. We go. Yet if I didn't do that, I would just assume that her desire to go to her type of restaurant is exactly the same as mine. And I might come at her at full steam ahead because I really want what I want. And even if she didn't care as much as I did, now that I'm coming full steam ahead, she's going to meet that. So all of a sudden, we've escalated the negotiation and the conflict when it didn't have to happen. So you have to prioritize all the different piece parts you're negotiating, and you have to understand or try to understand your partner's level of priority on the points that they're negotiating. If you do these things, you will be seen as empathetic and caring while still being strong in the negotiation. All right, I want to take one more question before we wrap up. I know it's getting late in the day. I'm scanning these questions here. All right, this is a great question that came in before our session. In high stakes boardrooms or investor pitches, and I'll add, or in any high stakes spontaneous speaking situation, how can you buy time to think without losing your presence? Great question, because it highlights a feeling that we all have. When we're speaking spontaneously, we have this sense of urgency. I must respond right away. And that's not true. You need not respond right away. You can take a beat. You can take a moment. 3 ways to buy you a little space. 1, ask for it. Say, give me a moment to think about that. There is no rule written anywhere that you have to respond immediately. And in fact, there is some good research in the field of power, status, and influence that says taking your time and deliberately delaying something, while not too long, actually increases people's perception of your status and power. People in power have the right to be slower. A second way to buy extra time is to ask a clarifying question, a follow-up question. So if somebody asks you for feedback, asks a question, follow it up, get some clarity, and that buys you a little time. And I mentioned when I talked about listening, the power of paraphrasing. Paraphrasing can be very useful. Paraphrasing is what we call a lower order cognitive skill. That's a fancy way of saying you can think about your answer and answer in the same time. So taking the time to paraphrase can be really helpful to you. So I appreciate the question. And in fact, I appreciate all the questions that have come up. Thank you for your insight and for your reflection. As I wrap up, I'd like to share some information with you. I hope that this is just the beginning of our conversation, not the end. As I shared with you, I host a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart. It's all about communication, 20-minute episodes. We play on all the players available in India and throughout the world and on YouTube. Take a listen. My latest book is Think Faster, Talk Smarter. It's all about what we've just discussed. The QR code takes you to a website that has lots of information and resources. And I'm a huge user of LinkedIn. So feel free to link in with me. You can ask me further questions. I am very open to your support. If you know people who would make good guests on our show or might want to sponsor it, reach out to me. We very much look forward to helping people around the world, but especially in your part of the world. As I wrap up, I want to thank all the people at Edge who brought this to you and brought me to you. They are wonderful people doing hard work. And I want to introduce you or remind you of an upcoming event, Overthinking to Overcoming, How to Break Free from Cognitive Overload. This is with Amy Morin. She's a psychotherapist, TED speaker, and best-selling author of 13 Things Mentally Strong People Do. This is coming up on June 27th at 7 p.m. Please take time to learn from her, and please take time to continue learning. It has been a true pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.